Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex. I'm Dave Bryan from SteelersDepot.com, and Alex Kozora obviously isn't with me today. He is in Mobile, Alabama, with three other members, contributors from the site, obviously covering the 2023 Senior Bowl. Today is Wednesday when you're listening to this. I'm actually recording this Tuesday night. No guest on today. I originally had Joel Corey from, former agent who currently writes and does contributions for CBS Sports. I had him lined up. Initially on this Wednesday was going to talk about, some contracts like Alex Highsmith and Cameron Sutton and some estimated values for those guys, and maybe, what some loose contract structures would be on those two guys. But that fell through. Joel Corey had another commitment he had to take care of. And instead of just trying to go out there and just find anybody to bring on the podcast, I figured, why not just try to fly solo? And in fact, I figured this would be a perfect opportunity to talk about the Steelers' 2023 salary cap situation and kind of break it down into, a little bit edible portions and try to explain some things that, we'll have some segments on obviously during regular episodes of the podcast where I get into, talking a little bit about the cap, but we never have really devoted kind of a full show to it. And especially this time of year with the start of the new league year, I don't know, what are we, about 45 days away roughly. That's obviously on March 15th. But I think we've got a good enough handle right now at this portion of the offseason, to go over where they are now, what the outlook is, and just kind of explain, some things line item and maybe hopefully add some clarity to a lot of you out there who might have some questions about it. So that's what today's podcast is going to be about. If you don't like the salary cap, you don't like numbers, or you're just not interested in it, hit the stop button right now, because that's all I'm going to do is talk about the salary cap in this episode here. So first and foremost, let's start. I think I should probably go over, my fascination with the salary cap and kind of what that stems from. I've always kind of been attracted to numbers, and by numbers, I don't mean algebra or geometry or any of that stuff. That stuff that lost me when I got into high school, and I just really had nothing to do with that. But, growing up, I always was that kid that would read the sports pages and try to figure out the batting averages and, look at the football box scores, and, on into my, later years of life, just I've been kind of a football stats kind of nerd, if you will. I'm really fascinated with the advanced analytics that are growing almost daily and all. And, when it comes to the salary cap, over the years, it's just been so hard to find great information on it and correct information. And, nowadays, obviously, you got great sites like Over the Cap and all like that. But, back, before they really became prominent, to find out answers and how the cap works, you really had to learn it yourself. And I just kind of dedicated myself to that process starting a number of years ago. And man, it's a development. It's a lot of learning, a lot of making mistakes and thinking things work one way and finding out they don't, and reading the CBA, and you just pick up things as you go along the way, and that's really how I've learned this. I used to, back when USA Today would put in like players' salaries in the papers or on the older versions online, I would always try to reverse engineer what those contracts look like. And some you could figure out and some you couldn't. And just over a process of time. And look, I mean, nowadays you've got all these agents out there that'll leak this information, and, thankful to have really a kind of a mentor in Joel Corey, who, feeds me a lot of information when things hit the NFLPA, and I get the true numbers right from the horse's mouth there, if you will. So that's kind of where my fascination with the cap came from. And, I'm that guy now that I have bad days if I'm out, if my numbers don't match, what the NFLPA site says. And for, anybody can just look at the public salary cap page on the NFLPA website. There's not much there. It's just a set of like 4 or 5 numbers there. But you can really, as you learn to do this, you can look at that number, the daily number as far as cap space, and I'm talking more so in, once March 15th rolls around up until the start of the season, and watch it move. And based on, transactions or signings that have happened, you can pretty much figure out what cap hits, what a cap hit of a certain player is, just by doing that, just by subtracting the old number from the new number, and any roster displacement that takes place like that. But that's kind of what you're always trying to do. And the NFLPA website cap page does not stay in real time either. So I might know a contract details before it actually hits, the NFLPA 4 days later, but you expect, you'll know when it hits, and it should match your numbers. So anyway, that's my fascination with the salary cap there. And once again, I learn little things still to this day about some contract construction. Not very often, but there are sometimes that, a few things that will surprise me with the way things set up. The Steelers usually do things a certain way. There's not a lot of guessing in it. They don't like to use, a lot of incentives if they can help it, or anything along those lines. So that makes it kind of easier on top of things when you've got a long history of the way that they've done deals, and percentage of signing bonuses and stuff like that. All right, so let's, I don't want to get too terribly long-winded here, and, I do stutter, and I do apologize for that. So hopefully it makes this still a listenable solo podcast here. But the news came out, a few days ago about what the 2023 NFL salary cap number would be league-wide, and that number is $224.8 million. That did not surprise me. Why? Well, I've had guys like Joel Corey kind of project for several weeks now that the number would come in right at around $225 million. So, man, did he hit that, almost on the nose there. $224.8 million. That's right there. So the good news is that a lot of the assumptions and the numbers that I've been working off of have been based off of a $225 million cap number. So, looking at what the real number is now, it's close there. So now that we're working with a $224.8 million league-wide cap number, the Steelers do have rollover money, leftover salary cap space from 2022 that they will roll over, and that number is going to be $4.427146. So $4.427 million and some change in rollover amount that from left over from the 2022 season and all. So if you add on that rollover amount onto $224.8 million, which is a league-wide cap number, you basically have a Steelers team cap number that they're working with of $229,227,146. And basically what that is the $224.8 million plus the rollover amount gives you that kind of working number that you want to obviously be under come the time March 15th, the start of the new league year, gets underway. So that's a little bit of an intro there. We have it established cap number league wide. We know what the rollover rollover amount is going to be for the Steelers from 2022 to 2023. All right, adjustments. Now, a couple of weeks from now, if there were any adjustments such as, I don't know, I think they mostly end up being something like grievance claims, injury grievance claims, or along those lines, like that. Those will all of a sudden hit the cap. And they usually do those league wide. They'll show up on the NFLPA page, and all of a sudden you'll get either an adduction or a subtraction based on whatever that adjustment is. It's hard to predict these kind of things. Usually in the case of the Steelers, it's not much of anything. I want to say maybe last year there's like an $80,000 adjustment for some sort of injury grievance or something like that I was able to figure out. So we don't know if there's going to be any adjustments forthcoming. My general research tells me that there's not going to be, but that doesn't mean that there won't be. So we'll have to wait and see if whatever that grievance or adjustment number winds up being. I don't think it's going to be too terribly much, or it could be a credit too. But either way, I don't think it's going to be that big of a number. And by that big of a number, I'm thinking 100,000 or less either way. So we'll just have to see when those adjustments do hit, and I'll obviously have a post on SteelersDepot.com, trying to acknowledge that adjustment and what, if I can figure out what the adjustment is for there. So that's something that's coming, in the coming weeks here. All right, the big question everybody has right now is, where do the Steelers sit cap-wise and today? And when you use the word today, I like to think of today as being March 15th, because March 15th is the day that matters. Everything in relation to March 15th. That's the way I map everything out and do my my line item stuff is how things look on March 15th. Because remember, you got several players right now that are signed to what they call reserve future contracts. And technically, those reserve future contracts do not go into effect until March 15th, the start of the new league year. So we count them now, but everything should revolve around the date of March 15th. All projections and everything should revolve around March 15th because that's the start of the new league year. So in my projections right now, where do the Steelers sit cap-wise as of me recording this? Well, based on all of my projections and the contracts that are in, and the reserve future contracts, when it comes to the rule of 51. Now, the rule of 51, let's go over that real quick. During the offseason, beginning on March 15th, the NFL works on a rule of 51 up until teams, the week one of the season there. At that point, the rule of 51 goes away, and then it becomes every contract that you have essentially at that point that's on the books impacts the cap. During the offseason, they have what's called the rule of 51, and what the rule of 51 is, it's your top 51 cap hits of the players that you have under contract, plus any like incentives or prorated signing bonus money of any players that fall outside of that rule of 51, your top 51 salaries. So let's say you have your top 51 salaries. Let's say a player, his cap number doesn't qualify to be in that top 51, but yet he has a prorated portion of his signing bonus for 2023 that's $100,000. We'll just use that as an example there. Well, then that $100,000 that's outside that contract that's outside of the top 51, that also counts in the rule of 51. Not the full cap charge, but any prorated bonus money, any likely to be earned money, there's a long list of things that could qualify for that. In the Steelers' case, it's normally just whatever that year's prorated signing bonus amount is. As we sit here today, the Steelers in their rule of 51, no players outside of the rule of 51, their top 51 salary cap hits, have any prorated money as we sit here today. So that doesn't impact them right now. Now, there will come a time, between now and week 1 of the regular season when they obviously will have some players outside of their top 51 cap charges that will have prorated signing bonus money that will count in the 51. But that's the rule of 51. Why do they call it a rule of 51? Why is it just 51 top 51 players? Man, I have tried to research this several times over the years and have come up empty. Nobody knows. I asked Joel Corey not too long ago, and he didn't have any type of answer for it. I think it's basically some sort of a kind of a competitive balance offseason mechanism, for the start of the new league year. Because what's to keep teams from loading up on a lot of players? And if they didn't have their top 51 count, then they could load up players and then just wait and kind of hoard them, if you will. So long story short, I guess you could say, is it's probably was put in there for some sort of competitive balance reason during the offseason related to the cap. And that's the best thing that I can come up with right now at this point. I'm on an endless journey of trying to find out why it's 51 and not 53, because obviously rosters at the start of this season are 53. But anyway, the rule of 51 also includes any dead money on the books as well too. And then that needs to be taken into account on top of it. So you've got your top 51 salaries, you've got any dead money that you have on the books, and then anything like prorated bonus money outside of the top 51. In case you're curious, the Steelers right now, and this is projected towards March 15th, they have a projected dead money amount of a little over $8 million, $8028814. Now that number includes Cameron Sutton dead money at $2.1 million. Now right now, Cameron Sutton at the time of this podcast is still under contract. However, in a matter of a couple of weeks, those void years on his contract are going to void. And when they do, the remaining prorated bonus money from 2023 and the subsequent years will all become dead money at that point. And remember, once again, we project this based on how things are projected to look on March 15th. March 15th is obviously after his contract is expected to void. So that's why I go ahead and count that $2.1 million as dead money now. And I technically don't have Cameron Sutton under contract for 2023. I think if you go to over the cap, they have that $2.1 million, but they have him as part of their rule of 51 right now until his contract actually voids. Once again, I work everything towards March 15th. So all that said, when you look at the carryover amount, the project, obviously the league-wide cap number, $224.8 million, the Steelers rule of 51, their dead money. Another thing that I go ahead and project for as well too is the offseason, the offseason workout NFL placeholder amount. Now every year around the springtime, the NFL charges teams a set amount league-wide it's a placeholder for workout bonuses for teams that go to that obviously phase 1, phase 2 of the OTAs and all like that. Players get paid for that, right? But that's outside of everything else there. So the league, based on the CBA, that total of the placeholder amount this year is $849,600. All right, so that's going to be deducted from the Steelers' salary cap here in the near future. I go ahead and deduct that now because, once again, we're working towards March 15th. Long story short, let's see, I've explained the rollover amount, adjustments, rule of 51, the dead money, the workout bonus placeholder amount. That puts the Steelers right now, according to my calculations and the new league-wide cap number, at $524,852 over the cap right now. So right around $500,000 over right now, based on March 15th projections. And, that's the reality of it. That's where they're at right now. And by now, we're, of course, talking about March 15th. Oh, and one other thing I did forget to mention, and this is in my notes here, shame on me, the proven performance escalator as well, too. Over the cap's already showing that for the two players, and those two players are outside linebacker Alex Highsmith and guard Kevin Dotson. They qualified for the level 1 proven performance escalator in their first 3 seasons there. It's not a big bump, obviously, but it is the amount of a original round restricted tender, which right now the projections based on the new set salary cap number, I believe, is $2.627 million for each of those. So those two guys will have their originally scheduled base salaries from the rookie deals jump up to whatever the final number ends up being. I think it's going to come in right at $2.627 million. And then obviously their their bonus prorations tacked on to that on top of it. But when we're talking about the right now, and once again, right now numbers mean March 15th, both of those guys are already, their proven performance escalator bumps are already factored in to my number that has the team at right around, once again, $524,852 over the cap. So that should be a good move on point as far as this podcast goes from there. Okay, the next topic that I have on my list to talk about is what's called displacement or roster displacement. We talked about the rule of 51 being the top 51 salary cap hits of the players that the team has under contract. Now, let's say you go out in free agency, or this time at all before free agency, maybe there's a street free agent or another futures guy out there that the team wants to sign. You already have, you're working top 51 that you're working with there. If they go out and sign another player, and that salary cap hit of that new player that they signed, if that qualifies to go into the rule of 51, well, obviously a player is going to drop out of that 51 in the process. So that's what you would then qualify as what we'd like to term as roster displacement. Let's say you have one guy inside the rule of 51 that has a rookie base salary of a minimal, his cap charge is $750,000, and your new player that you sign has let's just make up a number here, a $1 million cap charge. Well, he goes into the rule of 51. The player with the $750,000 cap charge goes out of the rule of 51. All right, you have a displacement there, right? You had one guy counting $750,000 against the cap. You're replacing him with a player with $1 million salary cap charge. The displacement there at that point is $250,000. That's how much cap space you actually used in your rule of 51 to sign that player and bump that other player out of the rule of 51. So anytime you see, the term roster displacement taking place in the rule of 51, you'll know what that references. Okay, so the Steelers when we're looking forward to March 15th, based on what we have right now under contract and the proven performance escalators, everything accounted for, the Cameron Sutton voiding of his contract and the dead money associated with that, all of the things that are currently expected to go in, to impact and go into effect by March 15th, we've accounted for, and that has left us with the team 524,852 over the cap. Well, that's obviously not going to cut it, right? You're going to have to clear some cap space along the way here. Ways. What are the ways to clear some cap space? Well, the most obvious way would be to cut some players, right, and free up some cap space that way. Now, we've been talking about really, I think, coming out of the 2022 season, there have been really four really prime candidates to be cut before March 15th, or a little bit better chance than average to be cut before March 15th. That list of players includes the likes of cornerback William Jackson III, inside linebacker Miles Jack, quarterback Mitchell Trubisky, and I believe the other one I've been working with possibility with would be a Kella Witherspoon. Quite honestly, I mean, could you cut some of these lower end, bottom of the roster kind of guys? Technically, yes, you could, but really, once again the roster displacement takes place in that, it makes more sense to hold those guys in to free up, $200,000 in cap space there. So I really think those are the four names to watch between now and March 15th. William Jackson III obviously leads the list. He has a currently scheduled cap charge of $12.176 million, a little bit more. It's almost half a million. It's $12,176,471 if we want to be exact. So let's call that almost $12.2 million before roster displacement takes place there. So I think all of you listening to this would agree that there's no way that William Jackson III can stay on this roster on March 15th at that number right now. So I fully expect, barring him just saying, hey, I'll take a pay cut down to the minimum salary, really, he's going to be out the door, I really think. So that's going to free up nearly $12.2 million in cap space, which is a lot of cap space for one player before roster displacement takes place there. So that's going to be a huge cut that I think is forthcoming outside of William Jackson III saying, hey, I'll play for the minimum. Let's rip this up and I'll take the veteran minimum and go from there. So right there, boom, nearly $12.2 million in salary cap space that this team can save by merely terminating his contract. Out the door he goes. There's no dead money associated with him whatsoever. And I really think you're going to see that take place here in the next several weeks here. Another guy we talked on that list before, Miles Jack. I got to be honest with you. I don't think they're going to cut Miles Jack, at least not by March 15th. You could maybe get on later into the offseason, training camp time, right before week 1 or something like that, and decide that you need to go in another direction. But I really, from where I sit here right now today in the end of January, I think I'll be surprised if Miles Jack is cut. Now, if he is cut, fine. You get $8 million in cap savings prior to roster displacement taking place if you do that. Once again, we'll see. I don't think it's going to happen. It's not impossible, though, as I like to say on top of it. Another candidate on the list that we rolled through, Mitch Trubisky. I was thinking there was a good chance that Mitch Trubisky could be a casualty here, cap casualty by March 15th, up until Art Rooney II talked to the media last week. And it really, based on what Art Rooney II had to say, it really sounded like Mitch Trubisky's at least going to be on this roster past March 15th, and that they really are kind of planning on him being the backup quarterback for this team in 2023. Like Miles Jack, if they did cut him, there would be $8 million in salary cap space they could clear in the process prior to roster displacement. But once again, if you would have put my hand to the fire 2 weeks ago, I would have said, yeah, I think Mitch will be cut. But since Art Rooney II spoke last week, I think they're going to hold on to him. So that's two of the names that of the four that are on the list that in Myles Jack and Mitch Trubisky that I don't think are going anywhere, at least not by March 15th here. So we'll definitely see on that. The last name on the list, Ahkello Witherspoon. Man, spent most of the 2022 season on the injured reserve list with a hamstring injury. They signed both him and Levi Wallace to identical deals last offseason. It looks like Levi Wallace is a keeper. It might be a good idea to part ways with Ahkello Witherspoon. In doing so, you would free up $4 million in salary cap space for 2023 prior, once again, to roster displacement taking place. And, $4 million, it's not a huge amount of money, but you add that $4 million onto the $12.176 million that you save with William Jackson III, boom, you're after displacement and everything takes place, you're right around $15 million in cleared salary cap space just on cutting two players in William Jackson III and Ahkello Witherspoon. From where I sit right now, once again, end of January, I'll be surprised if Ahkello Witherspoon isn't cut at this point. Now, obviously, they could work around him and that $4 million base salary, and his cap charge is $5.4825 million. But why even try to? I think prior to March 15th would be a good time to part ways with him. So if you want my projections about the players that will be cut, Gunnar Olszewski, I guess, is another one. But, it's really a $2 million that you save prior to roster displacement. And the displacement would be about a $750,000 amount. And you subtract that from the $2 million, you say what? $1.25 million, I guess, in salary cap space. You could build a pretty good list of players here at the bottom, from the middle of the roster on that could be cut. But how many times do we get to this portion of the season and the salary cap casualties, if you will, are only 3 players at the most? So that's where we're at right now on it. I think the 2 players that you see out the door will be Ahkello Witherspoon and William Jackson III, and in the process, and after roster displacement takes place, clearing right around $15 million as far as that goes. So that would obviously give the team a little bit of money to a little bit of cap space to work with at the start of free agency there. Now this team obviously likes to re-sign several of their own unrestricted free agents if they can. I don't think they're going to go overboard. Cameron Sutton is obviously the biggest name, I think, on the list of the guys that they want to re-sign. That's probably going to be a pretty, not over the top type of deal, but it won't be cheap either, so to speak. I'll have more on that of what that contract may or may not look like here in the coming weeks. But I think that clearing the nearly $15 million in those 2 players will give their team a little bit of room to go out there and at least start re-signing some of their own unrestricted free agents. And there's quite a few of them that they probably want to get back. Cameron Sutton, obviously, Zach Gentry, are they going to want him back on a pretty modest deal? Terrell Edmonds is a guy. What's going to happen with Larry Ogunjobi? That one, will they be able to retain him? But Cameron Sutton, I think, is the biggest one. Devontae Casey's another one that I really think they would like to try to re-sign on top of it. And they're going to need a little bit of cap space to do that. And I think the cutting of, once again, Ahkello Witherspoon and William Jackson III will easily help them at least get through the portion of re-signing their own unrestricted free agents that they want to keep. Now, we've cut a couple of players here. If you think they're going to cut more, fine. I think it's going to only be about 2 or 3 that we just went over and talked about right there. So what else can they do to free up salary cap space? The evil restructures, the thing that everybody hates, the old kicking the can down the road, the old everybody hates it, but it's become pretty much a staple of the Pittsburgh Steelers offseason for a long time now. And I think you're going to see a couple, at least one, possibly 2 restructures happen this offseason at some point. Will it be right at the right closer to the start of the new league year on March 15th to use some extra money for free agency? It's possible. Might they wait until deeper into the offseason once training camp gets underway? It really could go either way with that this year. It all depends on what their plans are, not only with the signing of their own unrestricted free agents, but what kind of plan they put together as far as signing any outside unrestricted free agents, and especially any outside unrestricted free agents that will have be a pretty big decent contract, and with salary cap charges probably around 5-6 million or so in 2023, just guesstimating at the top end there. So the 2 biggest restructure candidates that this team has this offseason are T.J. Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick. Those are the 2 guys that, quite honestly, between now and the start of the regular season, I think you'll see both those guys get restructured. Now, max restructures on both those guys. T.J. Watt would clear you $12.6, a little bit more than $12.6 million in salary cap in 2023. And Minkah Fitzpatrick just a hair over $10 million by doing a full restructure on his deal. Now, restructures, the player doesn't lose any money in that. Basically, what they're doing is they're getting paid money up front. A good portion of their base salary and any roster bonus that they might be due. Which, in the case of both these 2, I don't think they're dealing with that this year. But a good portion of their base salaries that they would be due in the case of Watt and Fitzpatrick would be turned into a signing bonus and then prorated over the remaining years of the deal. And once again, Watt and Fitzpatrick, Watt doing a full restructure on him would clear $12.6 million in 2023 salary cap space. And in the case of Minkah Fitzpatrick, you're looking at a hair over $10 million in 2023 salary cap space by doing a full restructure on him. That's $22 million, more than 20. It's about what, 22.67 in 2023 salary cap space that they can clear in doing so. And once again, when will it happen? That's the big question. Well, I think the when mostly revolves around how active they're going to be in outside free agency, because I think, by the cutting of the couple of players that we talked about just a little bit ago, that will get them through the re-signing of their own unrestricted free agents. Is just how active do they want to be in going outside in unrestricted free agency there. So I wish I had a better crystal ball that will tell me, yeah, they're going to do what, right ahead of March 15th. I don't know. They could, but it all revolves around their plan. I will say this, though. I think at some point between, once again, now and week 1 of the season, you will see both T.J. Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick have their contracts restructured. Kind of break glass in case of emergency, if you will. They could restructure Deontay Johnson's contract as well, too. I don't think they will have to do that, but if they wanted to do that, they could free up $4.71 million in salary cap space in for 2023 in doing so. Once again, I don't think they're going to have to go that deep there. I think Watt and Fitzpatrick are going to be the 2 that they do, but at least, have comfort in knowing that if they needed to, they could definitely go that route. So what have we done, kind of fabricated or made, created a scenario here. Pre-March 15th, you got the two cuts in possibly Witherspoon and William Jackson III. That's, what do we say, $15 million roughly after roster displacement takes place and cap savings there, and another, let's just call it around $22 million that they can clear via restructures on Watt and Fitzpatrick that I think are going to happen at some point. So 22 plus 15, I mean, that's $37 million in cap space. That sounds like a lot of cap space, right? I mean, to not only re-sign your own, but a few of your own unrestricted free agents, maybe go out there and make a splash or two in outside unrestricted free agents. Well, there's a catch, and that's what we're going to talk about next, kind of moving forward past the March 15th date. Okay, so let's move along in my notes here. What's next? You got the opportunity to clear all this cap space through a couple of cuts and a couple of restructures here, and man, it looks like 15, 22, $37 million in cap space. All right, well, here's some things that don't happen right away, but have to be accommodated along the way here, and most of them are really relegated to right at the start of the 2023 season. A couple, however, you need to be able to afford before then. Let's start first with the rookie pool this year and the draft picks that the team has. Those kids obviously aren't signed yet. The moment a player is drafted, he automatically hit your roster at a minimal salary until he actually does sign his rookie deal. With the new CBA a couple years ago, all these are slotted deals and based on the salary cap, and Over the Cap does a great job of projecting at what almost to the penny on a lot of times on what these rookie contracts will look like, salary bonus or signing bonus and all, and first year cap charge and all like that. Now, you look at these picks the Steelers have, and people will say, man, that's a lot of money they're going to have to afford overall to be able to accommodate signing all these, especially a first and second round draft pick, those kind of things there. Well, don't forget, we talked a little bit earlier in the show about roster displacement, right? So once one of those draft picks signs his deal, if he enters the rule of 51, upon signing that deal, well, then a player outside or currently inside the 51 would drop out. So you have to account for what they call the rookie pool and the offset that comes along with that in your projections. And as of right now, let me see if I can pull it up real quick on Over the Cap. I think they are projecting, assuming the Steelers stand pat with all 7 of their picks right now. They don't move up, they don't move down, they don't trade away a couple of them, but let's say they make their draft picks as planned right now. The projected total cap charges of those 7 players is nearly $9.625 million. You're thinking, man, $9.625 million. That's a lot of money, a lot of cap space in 2023 for those 7 draft picks. All right, well, that's where the roster displacement, you need to factor that into the equation here. So, once all those 7 players, assuming they stick with the picks that they have, they sign them, they hit the cap and all like that, there's going to be the roster displacement that takes place. Theoretically, and as far as projections go on the things that I do, the real offset that they have to be able to afford when it comes to that right now is almost $4.375 million. So we took a number that looked kind of daunting at $9.625 million, nearly $9.625 million, and because of the offset process of the rookie pool, in reality they have to afford almost $4.375 million. Now, might those numbers shift here between now and the time the actual deal is signed by each one of these players? Possibly, but probably not enough to really get worked up about. I mean, if it moves either way, it might be I don't know, $80,000. That over the cap's done this for a long time. They've gotten pretty damn good at calculating this stuff. So let's call that number right now $4.375 million that the Steelers will need to accommodate in their cap past March 16th once they sign their draft class. Now, obviously, if they move around, move up, move down, that'll change the numbers a little bit there depending on what they do. But we have to work under the assumption right now at this point of the offseason that they'll stand as is, and we're working off of those projected numbers there. All right, what else is coming down the road that they have to plan for? Well, once the rule of 51 ends at come right before the start of the season, where teams have to be compliant with their 53-man roster, well, you're working off of a rule of 51, which is 51 salaries. Well, at that point, you're going from 51 to 53, so you got to be able to afford 2 more players hitting your cap number at that point. Let's assume that both those players are rookies and they're minimal salary guys at $750,000 each. Well, you've got to be able to accommodate one, assuming that's the case, it's 2 rookies on minimal salaries, the 51 going to 53, you've got to be able to accommodate another $1.5 million in cap space. So let's add that to, the 4.37, whatever we said the number was for the offset. Let me pull that back up again here. Real quick, what did we say that number was? 4.375 million. All right. So, 4.375 and another 1.5. I mean, that's we're up to about almost $5.9 million that we're eating into that 30-something million that we cleared. Once the regular season starts as well, too, the team has to be able to, practice squad players, 16-man practice squads, that goes against the cap, folks. That goes against the cap. So you better budget for it. You don't have to, you don't have to have that space cleared come March 15th, but you've got to be able to afford that number, the collective charges come the week 1 of the season. So you might as well start looking out ahead at how much some of these outlying expenses will hit the cap at some point. Now, kind of a projected practice squad at this point and the impact on the cap would be, what I have is $4.075 million. It might be a tad higher than that. It might be a tad lower, but just based on doing this a while, that number of 4.075 is probably going to be pretty close. So you add that to the other 2 things we talked about, the rookie pool offset of $4.374 million, the end of Rule of 51, which is the addition of the 52nd and 53rd player to the roster, and now your full practice squad. I mean, we're up to 8.3, we're up to 9.8, almost $10 million that this team has got to project in using cap space for come week 1 of the season. Not right now, not March 15th, but come by week 1 of the season, and definitely by the time, the 4.374 million, by the time the rookie class is all signed to their, first deals there. What else? Man, I'm slowly eating into the money here, aren't I? You better project, for a couple players to start the regular season on injured reserve. It'll be a miracle if they don't have that happen. It's kind of a fact of cost of doing business, if you will. When those, let's say week 1 rolls around, they got to put a couple of guys on IR. Your 53-man roster, let's say 3 players go on injured reserve during that final roster maneuvering there right before week 1. In essence, your 53-man roster became a 56-man roster, right? Because players on injured reserve, they count whatever their cap charges are, come week 1 of the season. Now, some of those players might be, undrafted guys or something like that, and those guys will have what they call split salaries, where if they go on IR, they go on IR at a reduced rate other than their full cap charge. Regardless of what it is, a good rule of thumb based on this year's minimum salaries and salary tables and all like that, you better count on needing another $3 million in cap space to accommodate whatever happens on IR. It's just, once again, it's just one of those things that you better account for happening. You don't have to account for it on March 16th. You don't have to worry about it right now. But you have to make sure that you have the cap space down the road to accommodate such things. So let's go through this again. That's another $3 million that I basically am spending down the road there. You've got the 4.374 in the rookie pool offset. You got the 1.5 in the that's got to go to your 52nd and 53rd player on the roster. You got almost 4.1 million for a practice squad. You better be able to accommodate, and you better be on the lookout of maybe spending, and it could be higher than $3 million. I've seen it. We've seen some teams go through some crazy stuff during the preseason and training camp and all, but let's go ahead and budget $3 million for that. So we're at let's see, 7, 8.5, another 4.4. I mean, we're encroaching on $12.5 million in salary cap space. That needs to be planned for down the road. Oh, and then there's one more thing on top of it there. This team is notorious of liking to have quite a bit of salary cap space in the bank, so to speak, free salary cap space to use for in-season roster moves, elevations, all that kind of stuff. And for a long time, people were saying, they'll only need about $4 or $5 million for that put aside. The last couple of seasons, we've seen them enter the regular season with right around $9 million in available salary cap space. Now, you have to look at that as a potential cost because you're allotting for it. You're budgeting to have that much free at the start of the regular season. So it doesn't just magically appear. You've got to budget for that kind of space come week one of the season. Once again, these are not things that happen right at March 15th. They're things, though, that teams have to plan for come the start of the regular season. So, and I'll be surprised if it's not $9 million again. Could it be lower than that? Absolutely. Could it be higher than that? Absolutely. But, I've been tracking this quite a while, and I'll be quite surprised if it's not in the neighborhood of that 8 to 9, maybe even $10 million come week one of the regular season. So we've got these 5 things that we've talked about that the team has to account for that are kind of technically real charges, if you will. 4.375 for the rookie pull offset, 1.5 for the end of Rule 51 to accommodate the 52nd and 53rd player, practice squad of a little over $4 million, an injured reserve budget of $3 million for the replacement, basically, of that. What it would cost to have those extra 3 players on your roster, and a in-season injury. I label this a practice squad and 53-man in-season injury replacement fund. That's how I label it, of $9 million. You add all those 5 forthcoming charges. And once again, talk about forthcoming, more closer to the start of the regular season outside of the rookie pool offset there. That totals up to nearly $22 million, $21.9 million. So how much salary cap space, let's go ahead and round that number up and let's call it $22 million in total there. And in the salary cap space that we created via cutting William Jackson III, Akella Witherspoon, and restructuring the contracts of TJ Watt and Mika Fitzpatrick. That's 22.6, another 12, 34. What do we say? About $38 million in that. So that 37, $38 million, you got to account for that $22 million at some point down the road that we talked about. You're looking at $16 million basically in salary cap space that, depending on how they're playing, can go against free agency, whether it be re-signing their own or re-signing outside. Now, you can do a lot with let's call the number 16 million to go towards free agents, their own and outside free agents. The way contracts get structured and first year hits, salary cap charges and all like that, and then roster displacement of players once they're signed, hitting the rule of 51, you'd be surprised how far that'll carry you. You really will. Look, you go out and you get a free agent and he has, let's say your most expensive signing this offseason has a salary cap charge of $7 million. Then you back out $750,000 from that because of roster displacement. Well, that's probably going to be your biggest cap charge that you have to come. Let's say you had two of those during the offseason. And let's say each of them moved the cap needle by $6 million each. So you're up to $12 million. We're talking that we had about $16 million to play with. That other $4 million, believe it or not, you can do a lot with the way the Steelers approach free agency and first year cap hits and roster displacement goes with that. So I hope I kind of explained that to you and broke it down with the forthcoming charges, because every time I do one of my salary cap updates, I have what they are real time, and then I have the projected future salary cap expenses, and it drives people crazy because they look at it, they don't understand how I'm working with the number. And hopefully I've explained what those forthcoming future salary cap expenses are, when to expect them to happen, and those kind of things. So, I guess what I'm getting at here is where we sit right now and looking ahead at these projections, and assuming you get a couple of restructures done on Watt and Fitzpatrick, and assuming you cut players like a Keller Witherspoon and William Jackson III, we'll obviously see what happens with Miles Jack and Mitch Trubisky. I mean, once again, $8 million each if you want to cut those guys. I know a lot of you screaming, cut them, but I got a feeling they're going to be, hanging around there. And once again, too, here's something else to consider. Are you going to sign Alex Highsmith to a contract extension during the offseason? That's a big question right now. And I think they might try to, and I think they will, but until it's done, it's not done. And obviously, in doing so, his cap number, if they got a deal done, let's say around, 15, with an average yearly value of somewhere between 15 and a half to, let's say, $17 million a year, that's going to present a pretty decent 2023 cap charge number for him. And then, you obviously can displace his previously projected cap number, which right now is $2.835 million. But, you're probably looking at spending, guesstimate about another $5 million, $4 or $5 million in additional salary cap space if you sign him to a contract extension this offseason as well, too. You look at this roster overall, there's not, as far as spending more salary cap space goes, it doesn't look like anybody else on the roster, if they do sign him to an extension, A, it wouldn't probably be a lucrative one, and B, probably wouldn't impact the cap too terribly much overall there. But I think Alex Highsmith is the name to watch overall here. Obviously you're going to have some tendering of some restricted free agents that we haven't talked about that's going to happen before March 15th. As well, too. Any of those guys that you tender once the roster displacement takes place in the rule of 51, it's not like you're going to use a lot of salary cap space up. Some, I mean, but I don't think you're going to see this team tender quite a few of their restricted free agents this year. Overall, I think you might see guys like James Pierre. I think is one that they might restricted tender overall there, but I don't think you're going to see too much movement in that. But to kind of recap here, I from where I sit and doing this as long as I've done it, knowing kind of the Steelers' history of this, don't expect this team to go hog wild wild in outside free agent shopping. In fact, it might not even be as busy as it was a year ago. You had the whole Miles Jack thing. You had the Mitch Trubisky thing. You had the Witherspoon new deal. You had Levi Wallace was an outside guy. Mason Cole was an outside guy that they brought in. They obviously re-signed a few of the Gunnar Olszewski was one that they brought in from the outside. They obviously signed Deontay Johnson and Chikwama Okorafor to new deals last offseason and all. But as far as outside unrestricted free agency goes this year, once again, I think they're going to be, the plan is probably going to mostly revolve around re-signing their own, and then maybe one or two more modest type middle price kind of unrestricted free agents outside, and then probably another two or three of the kind of the lower value unrestricted free agents as far as that goes there. So, that's basically a recap of how I do my numbers and how I do my projections and kind of everything involved in that. And I think right now, what are we sitting at time-wise for this single man podcast? Right at 1 hour there. So I think that's probably a good time to shut this one off. If you got any, obviously, I try to explain this as thoroughly as possible, but you might have a lot of questions about this still. Shoot me an email, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com, and, maybe we'll address it in a future show moving forward here. But, I thought that, being able, and I will have Joel Corey on in the coming weeks, and we'll talk about what a new contract for Cameron Sutton might look like. We'll talk about what an extension for Alex Highsmith might look like, and, kind of some other cap related things as well, too. Obviously, it won't be an hour interview or anything like that, but we will have him on at some point during this offseason, maybe more than once. We'll see. But in the meantime, once again, if you have any questions about what I talked about today, and assuming you made it this far, an hour to listen to me kind of stutter through this, and I appreciate your patience on that here. I think that technically outside of the terrible takes, this is the first time I've kind of attempted a solo-only episode of the Terrible Podcast, and I've done this a long time. I don't like doing them unless I have, I just don't like doing them. I think it makes for a better show, quite honestly, with the less of me as you can get. But the salary cap is on a lot of people's minds at this time of the offseason. I get a lot of questions about it, get Twitter comments and all like that. And I hope that this hour has peeled back the curtain to some degree, and hopefully you learned something overall, because it took me a long time to learn a lot of this stuff here. So, once again, if you got questions about my numbers or want me to further explain something, that I explained in this show, or if you think I forgot something, feel free to email me, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. We'll see what I can cook up together for Friday. Alex and the gang are still out of town. I don't know. Maybe maybe the people from the Shrine Bowl will be back settled. Maybe we can do some sort of a round table with them and talk about draft prospects. We'll figure something out by Friday. But until then, you can follow me on Twitter @Steelers Depot. You can follow Alex on Twitter @Alex_Kozora. Follow the show @Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button up right navigational bar. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, please hit SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button up right navigational bar as well. And I appreciate your time, and especially if you decided to listen this far into the podcast. As always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.